Good evening, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes for story time, and we continue tonight with our book, The Phantom of the Opera. And we begin tonight with chapter 28, The Commissary, the Viscount, and the Persian. The first words of the commissary of police on entering the manager's office were to ask after the missing prima donna. "Is Christine Daae here?" "Christine Daae here?" echoed Richard. "No, why?" As for Moncharmin, he had not enough strength left to utter a word. Richard repeated for the commissary, and the compact crowd which had followed him into the office observed an impressive silence. "Why do you ask if Christine Daae is here, Monsieur le Commissary?" "Because she has not been found," declared the commissary of the police solemnly. "What do you mean, she has not been found? Has she disappeared?" "In the middle of a performance." "In the middle of the performance? This is extraordinary, isn't it? And what is quite as extraordinary is that you should first learn it from me." "Yes," said Richard, taking his head in his hands and muttering, "What is this new business? Oh, it's enough to make a man send in his resignation." And I pulled a few hairs out of his mustache without even knowing what he was doing. So she disappeared in the middle of the performance," he repeated. "Yes, she was carried off in the prison act, at the moment when she was invoking the aid of the angels, but I doubt if she was carried off by an angel. And I am sure that she was." Everybody looked around. A young man, pale and trembling with excitement, repeated, "I am sure of it." "Sure of what?" asked Millefoyd. "That Christine Daae was carried off by an angel, Monsieur le Commissary. I can tell you his name." "Aha! Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny. So you maintain that Christine Daae was carried off by an angel of the opera, no doubt." "Yes, monsieur, by an angel of the opera. And I will tell you where he lives when we are alone." "You are right, monsieur." And the commissary of police, inviting Raoul to take a chair, cleared the room of all the rest, excepting the managers. Then Raoul spoke. "Monsieur le Commissary, the angel is called Eric. He lives in the opera, and he is the angel of music." "The angel of music? Really? That is very curious. The angel of music." And turning to the managers, Monsieur Millefoyd asked, "Have you an angel of music on the premises, gentlemen?" Richard and Moncharmin shook their heads without even speaking. "Oh," said the Viscount, "these gentlemen have heard of the opera ghost. Well, I am in a position to state that the opera ghost and the angel of music are one and the same person, and his real name is Eric." Monsieur Millefoyd rose and looked at Raoul tentatively. "I beg your pardon, monsieur, but it is your intention to make fun of the law? And if not, what is this about the opera ghost? I say that these gentlemen have heard of him. Gentlemen, it appears that you know the opera ghost?" Richard rose, with the remaining hairs of his mustache in his hand. "No, Monsieur Commissary, no, we do not know him, but we wish that we did. For this very evening he has robbed us of 20,000 francs. And Richard turned a terrible look on Moncharmin, which seemed to say, "Give me back my 20,000 francs, or I'll tell the whole story." Moncharmin understood what he meant, for, with a distracted gesture, he said, "Oh, tell everything and have done with it." As for Millefoyd, he looked at the managers and at Raoul by turns and wondered whether he had strayed into a lunatic asylum. He passed his hand through his hair. "A ghost," he said, "who, on the same evening, carries off an opera singer and steals 20,000 francs is a ghost who must have his hands very full. If you don't mind, we will take the questions in order. The singer first. The 20,000 francs after. Come, Monsieur de Chagny, let us try to talk seriously. You believe that Mademoiselle Christine Daae has been carried off by an individual called Eric. Do you know this person? Have you seen him?" "Yes." "Where?" "In the churchyard." Monsieur Mifroid gave a start, began to scrutinize Raoul again, and said, "Of course, that's where ghosts usually hang out. And what were you doing in the churchyard?" "Monsieur," said Raoul, "I can quite understand how absurd my replies must seem to you, but I beg you to believe that I am in full possession of my faculty. The safety of the person dearest to me in the world is at stake. I should like to convince you in a few words, for time is pressing and every minute is valuable. Unfortunately, if I do not tell you the strangest story that you have ever heard from the beginning, you will not believe me. I will tell you all I know about the opera ghost, Monsieur Commissary. Alas, I do not know much." "Never mind. Go on," exclaimed Richard and Moncharmin, suddenly greatly interested. Unfortunately, their hopes of learning some detail that could put them on the track of their hoaxer, they were soon compelled to accept the fact that Monsieur Raoul de Chagny had completely lost his head. All that story about Perrault Guirec, death's heads, and enchanted violins could only have taken birth in the disordered brain of a youth mad with love. It was evident, also, that Monsieur Commissary de Mifroid shared their view, and the magistrate would certainly have cut short the incoherent narrative if circumstances had not taken it upon themselves to interrupt it. The door opened and a man entered, curiously dressed in an enormous frock coat and a tall hat, at once shabby and shiny, that came down to his ears. He went up to the commissary and spoke to him in a whisper. It was doubtless a detective come to deliver an important communication. During this conversation, Monsieur Mifroid did not take his eyes off Raoul. At last, addressing him, he said, "Monsieur, we have talked enough about the ghost. Will you now talk about yourself a little, if you have no objection? You were to carry off Mademoiselle Christine Daae tonight?" "Yes, Monsieur le Commissary." "After the performance?" "Yes, Monsieur le Commissary." "All your arrangements were made?" "Yes, Monsieur Commissary." "The carriage was brought to you, and was to take you both away. They were fresh horses in readiness at every stage?" "That is true, Monsieur le Commissary." "And nevertheless your carriage is still outside the rotunda, awaiting your orders, is it not?" "Yes, Monsieur le Commissary." "Did you know that there were 3 other carriages there in addition to yours?" "I did not pay the least attention." "They were the carriages of Mademoiselle Sorellet, which could not find room in the Cour de l'Administration of Carlotta, and your brother, Monsieur le Comte de Chagny." "Very likely. What is certain that, though your carriage and Sorellet's and Carlotta's are still there, by the rotunda pavement, Monsieur le Comte de Chagny's carriage is gone. This has nothing to say to you." "I beg your pardon. Was not Monsieur le Comte opposed to your marriage with Mademoiselle Daae?" "That is a matter that only concerns the family. You have answered my question. He was opposed to it, and that was why you were carrying Christine Daae out of your brother's reach. Well, Monsieur de Chagny, allow me to inform you that your brother has been smarter than you. It is he who has carried off Christine Daae." "Ah, impossible," moaned Raoul, pressing his hand to his heart. "Are you sure?" "Immediately after the artist's disappearance, which was procured by means which we still have to ascertain, he flung into his carriage, which drove right across Paris at a furious pace." "Across Paris?" asked poor Raoul, in a hoarse voice. "What do you mean by across Paris?" "Across Paris and out of Paris, by the Brussels road." "Oh," cried the young man, "I shall catch them." And he rushed out of the office. "And bring her back to us," cried the commissary gaily. "Ah, that's a trick worth 2 of the Angel of Music's." And, turning to his audience, Monsieur Mifroid delivered a little lecture on police methods. "I don't know for a moment whether Monsieur le Comte de Chagny has really carried Christine Daae off or not, but I want to know, and I believe that at this moment no one is more anxious to inform us than his brother, and now he is flying in pursuit of him. He is my chief auxiliary. This, gentlemen, is the art of the police. Which is believed to be so complicated, and which, nevertheless, appears so simple as soon as you see that it consists in getting your work done by people who have nothing to do with the police. But Monsieur le Commissary de Police Mifroid would not have been quite so satisfied with himself if he had known that the rush of his rapid emissary was stopped at the entrance to the very first corridor. A tall figure blocked Raoul's way. "Where are you going so fast, Monsieur de Chagny?" asked a voice. Raoul impatiently raised his eyes and recognized the Astrakhan cap of an hour ago. He stopped. "It's you," he cried in a feverish voice. "You, who know Eric's secrets and don't want to speak of them. Who are you? You know who I am. I am the Persian." Chapter 19. The Viscount and the Persian. Raoul now remembered that his brother had once shown him that mysterious person, of whom nothing was known except that he was a Persian and that he lived in a little old-fashioned flat in the Rue de Rivoli. The man with ebony skin, the eyes of jade, and the Astrakhan cap bent over Raoul. "I hope, Monsieur de Chagny," he said, "that you have not betrayed Eric's secret." "And why should I hesitate to betray the monster, sir?" Raoul rejoined haughtily, trying to shake off the intruder. "Is he your friend by any chance?" "I hope that you said nothing about Eric, sir, because Eric's secret is also Christine Daae's, and to talk about one is to talk about the other." "Oh, sir," said Raoul, becoming more and more impatient, "you seem to know about many things that interest me, and yet I have no time to listen to you. Once more, Monsieur de Chagny, where are you going so fast? Can you not guess? To Christine Daae's assistance. Then, sir, stay here, for Christine Daae is here. With Eric? With Eric." "How do you know?" "I was in the performance, and no one in the world but Eric could contrive such an abduction like that. Oh," he said with a deep sigh, "I recognized the monster's touch. You know him, then?" The Persian did not reply, but heaved a fresh sigh. "Sir," said Raoul, "I do not know what your intentions are, but can you do anything to help me? I mean, to help Christine Daae?" "I think so, Monsieur de Chagny, and that is why I spoke to you. What can I do?" Try to take you to her and to him? If you can do me that service, sir, my life is yours. One word more. The commissary of police tells me that Christine Daae has been carried off by my brother, Count Philippe. "Oh, Monsieur de Chagny, I don't believe a word of it. It's not possible, is it?" "I don't know if it's possible or not, but there are ways and there are ways of carrying people off, and Monsieur le Comte Philippe has never, as far as I know, had anything to do with witchcraft." "Your arguments are convincing, sir, and I am not a fool. Oh, let us make haste. I place myself entirely in your hands. How should I not believe you, when you are the only one to believe me, when you are the only one not to smile when Eric's name is mentioned?" The young man impetuously seized the Persian's hands. They were ice cold. "Silence," said the Persian, stopping and listening to the distant sounds of the theater. "We must not mention the name here. Let us say he and him. Then there will be less danger of attracting his attention. Do you think he is near us?" "It is quite possible, sir. If he is not, at this moment, with his victim, in the house on the lake." "Ah, so you know the house too. If he is not there, he may be here, in this wall, in this floor, in this ceiling. Come." And the Persian, asking Raoul to deaden the sound of his footsteps, led him down passages which Raoul had never seen before, even at the time when Christine used to take him there for walks through the labyrinth. "If only Darius has come," said the Persian. "Who is Darius?" "Darius is my servant. They will now They were now in the center of a real deserted square, an immense apartment, ill-lit by a small lamp. The Persian stopped Raoul and, in the softest whispers, asked, "What did you say to the commissary?" "I said that Christine Day's abductor was the angel of music, alias the opera ghost, and that his real name was—" "Hush!" "And did he believe you?" "No." "He attached no importance to what you said?" "No." "He took you for a bit of a madman?" "Yes." "So much the better," sighed the Persian, and they continued their road. After going up and down several staircases which Raoul had never seen before, the two men found themselves in front of a door, which the Persian opened with a master key. The Persian and Raoul were both, of course, in dress clothes, but whereas Raoul had a tall hat, the Persian wore an astrakhan cap, which I have already mentioned. It was in infringement of the rule, which insists upon the tall hat behind the scenes. But in France, foreigners are allowed every license. The Englishman traveling with his cap, the Persian his cap in astrakhan. "Sir," said the Persian, "your tall hat will be in your way. You would do well to leave it in the dressing room." "What dressing room?" asked Raoul. "Christine Day's." And the Persian, letting Raoul through the door, which he had just opened, showed him the actress's room opposite. They were at the end of a passage, the whole length of which Raoul had been accustomed to traverse before knocking at Christine's door. "How well you know the opera, sir." "Not so well as he does," said the Persian modestly, and he pushed the young man into Christine's dressing room, which was as Raoul had left it a few minutes earlier. Closing the door, the Persian went to a very thin partition that separated the dressing room from the big lumber room next to it. He listened and then coughed loudly. There was a sound of someone stirring in the lumber room, and a few seconds later, a finger tapping at the door. "Come in," said the Persian. A man entered, also wearing an astrakhan cap and dressed in a long overcoat. He bowed and took a richly carved case from under his coat, put it on the dressing table, bowed once, and went to the door. "Did no one see you come in, Darius?" "No, master." "Let no one see you go out." The servant glanced down the passage and swiftly disappeared. The Persian opened the case. It contained a pair of long pistols. "When Christine Day was carried off, sir, I sent word for my servant to bring me these pistols. I have had them a long time, and they can be relied upon." "Do you mean to fight a duel?" asked the young man. "It will certainly be a duel, which we shall have to fight," said the other, examining the priming of the pistols. "And what a duel!" Handing one of the pistols to Raoul, he added, "In this duel, we shall not be 2-1. We shall be 2-1, and not 1-1. But you must be prepared for everything, for we shall be fighting the most terrible adversary that you can imagine. But you love Christine Day, do you not?" "I worship the ground she stands on. But you, sir, who do not love her, tell me why I find you ready to risk your life for her. You must certainly hate Eric." "No, sir," said the Persian sadly, "I do not hate him. If I hated him, he would long ago have ceased doing harm. Has he done you harm? I have forgotten him, and the harm which he has done to me." "I do not understand you." "You treat him as a monster. You speak of his crime. He has done you harm, and I find you the same inexplicable pity that drove me to despair when I saw it in Christine." The Persian did not reply. He fetched a stool and set it against the wall facing the great mirror, and filled the whole of the wall space opposite. Then he climbed on the stool, and, with his nose to the wallpaper, seemed to be looking for something. "Ah," he said, after a long search, "I have it." And raising his finger above his head, he pressed against a corner in the pattern of the paper. Then he turned round and jumped off the stool. "In a half-minute," he said, "he shall be on his road." And, crossing the whole of the dressing-room, he felt the great mirror. "No, it is not yielding yet," he muttered. "Oh, are we going out by the mirror?" asked Raoul. "Like Christine Day?" So you knew Christine Day went out by the mirror? She did so before my eyes, sir. I was hidden behind a curtain of the inner room, and I saw her vanish, not by the glass, but in the glass. And what did you do? I thought it was an aberration of my senses, a mad dream. Or some new fancy of the ghosts, chuckled the Persian. Ah, Monsieur de Chagny, he continued, still with his hand on the mirror. Would that we had to do with a ghost. We could then leave our pistols in their case. Put down your hat, please. There, and now cover your shirt front as much as you can with your coat, as I am doing. Bring the lapels forward. Turn up the collar. We must make ourselves as invisible as possible. Bearing against the mirror, after a short silence, he said, It takes some time to release the counterbalance. When you press on the spring from the inside of the room, it is different when you press from behind the wall and can act directly on the counterbalance. Then the mirror turns at once and is moved with incredible rapidity. What counterbalance? Asked Raoul. Why, the counterbalance that lifts the whole of this wall on its pivot. You surely don't expect it to move by itself, by enchantment. If you watch, you will see the mirror first rise an inch or two, and then shift an inch or two from left to right. It will then be on a pivot, and it will swing around. It's not turning, said Raoul impatiently. Oh, wait. You have time enough to be impatient, sir. The mechanism has obviously become rusty, or else the spring isn't working. Unless it is something else, added the Persian anxiously. What? He added, he may simply have cut the cord of the counterbalance and blocked the whole apparatus. Why should he? He does not know that we are coming this way. I dare he suspects it, for he knows that I understand the system. It's not turning. And Christine, sir? Christine? The Persian said coldly, We shall do all that is humanly possible to do, but he may stop us at the first step. He commands the walls, the doors, the trapdoors. In my country, he was known by the name which means the trapdoor lover. But why these walls obey him alone? He did not build them. Yes, sir, that is just it. That is just what he did. Raoul looked at him in amazement, but the Persian made a sign to him to be silent and pointed to the glass. There was a sort of shivering reflection. Their image was troubled, as in a rippling sheet of water, and then all became stationary again. You see, sir, that it is not turning. Let us take another road. Tonight there is no other road, declared the Persian, in a singularly mournful voice. And now look out, and be ready to fire. He himself raised his pistol opposite the glass. Raoul imitated his movement. With his free arm, the Persian drew the young man to his chest, and suddenly the mirror turned. In a blinding daze of crosslight, it turned like one of those revolving doors which have lately been fixed to entrances of most restaurants, in turn carrying Raoul and the Persian with it, and suddenly hurling them from the full light into the deepest darkness. Chapter 20. The Cellars of the Opera. Your hand high, ready to fire, repeated Raoul's companion quickly. The wall behind them, having completed the circle which it described upon itself, closed again, and the two men stood motionless for a moment, holding their breath. At last the Persian decided to make a movement, and Raoul heard him slip on his knee and feel for something in the dark with his groping hands. Suddenly the darkness was made visible by a small dark lantern. Raoul instinctively stepped back, as though to escape the scrutiny of a secret enemy. But he soon perceived that the light belonged to the Persian, whose movements he had closely been observing. The little red disc was turned in every direction, and Raoul saw the floor, the walls, the ceiling were all formed of planking. It must have been the ordinary road taken by Eric to reach Christine's dressing room and impose upon her innocence. and Raoul, remembering the Persian's remark, thought that it had been mysteriously constructed by the ghost himself. Later, he learned that Eric had found all prepared for him a secret passage, long known to himself alone, and contrived at the time of the Paris Commune to allow the jailers to convey their prisoners straight to the dungeons that had been constructed for them in the cellars. For the Ferrates had occupied the Opera House immediately after the 18th of March and had made a starting place right at the top for their Montfier balloons, which carried their incendiary proclamations to the departments and state prison right at the bottom. The Persian went on his knees and put his lantern on the ground. He seemed to be working at the floor, and suddenly he turned off his light. Then Raoul heard a faint click and saw a very pale, luminous square on the floor of the passage. It was as though a window had opened on the opera cellars, which were still lit. Raoul no longer saw the Persian, but he suddenly felt him by his side, and he heard him whisper, "Follow me, and do all that I do." Raoul turned to the luminous aperture. Then he saw the Persian, who was still on his knees, hang by his hands from the rim of the opening with his pistol between his teeth and slide into the cellar below. Curiously enough, the Viscount had absolute confidence in the Persian, though he knew nothing about him. His emotion was speaking of the monster and struck him as sincere. And if the Persian had cherished any sinister designs against him, he would not have armed him with his own hands. Besides, Raoul must reach Christine Daae by all costs. He therefore went on his knees, also hung from the trap, and with both hands. "Let's go," said a voice. He dropped into the arms of the Persian, who told him to lie down flat, closed the trap door above him, and crouched down beside him. Raoul tried to ask a question, but the Persian's hand was on his mouth, and he heard a voice which recognized as the commissary of the police. Raoul and the Persian were completely hidden behind a wooden partition near them. A small staircase led to a little room in which the commissary appeared to be walking up and down, asking questions. The faint light was just enough to enable Raoul to distinguish the shape of things around him, and he would not restrain a dull cry. There were 3 corpses. 3. The first lay on the narrow landing of the little staircase. The 2 others had rolled to the bottom of the staircase. Raoul could not have touched one of the 2 poor wretches by passing his fingers through the partition. "Silence," whispered the Persian. He, too, had seen the bodies and gave one word of explanation. "He." The commissary's voice, now heard more distinctly. He was asking for information about the system of lighting, which the stage manager supplied. The commissary, therefore, must be in the organ or its immediate neighborhood. Contrary to what one might think, especially in the connection with the opera house, the organ is not a musical instrument. At the time, electricity was employed only for a few scenic scenes and scenic effects. For the bells, the immense building and the stage itself were still lit by gas. Hydrogen was used to regulate and modify lighting of a scene, and this was done by means of a special apparatus which, because of the multiplicity of its pipes, was known as the organ. A box beside the prompter's box was reserved for the chief gasman, who from there gave his orders to the assistants and saw that they were executed. Mauclair stayed in his box during the performance, but now Mauclair was not in his box, and his assistants not there to help. "Mauclair, Mauclair!" the stagehand's voice echoed through the cellars, but Mauclair did not reply. "I have said that door opened on a little staircase and led to the cellar." The commissary pushed it, but it resisted. "I say," he said to the stage manager, "I can't open this door. Is it always so difficult?" The stage manager forced it open with his shoulder. He saw that at the same time he was pushing the human body, he could not keep back in exclamation, for he recognized the body at once. Mauclair! Poor devil, he is dead. But Monsieur Commissary Mifroid, whom nothing surprised, was stooping over that big body. No, he said, he is dead drunk, which is not quite the same thing. It is the first time, if so, said the stage manager, for someone has given him a narcotic. That is quite possible. Mifroid went down a few steps and said, Look! By the light of the little red lantern, at the foot of the stairs, they saw two other bodies. The stage manager recognized Mauclair's assistants. Mifroid went down and listened to their breathing. They are sound asleep, he said. Very curious business. Some person unknown must have interfered with the gas man and his staff, and that person unknown was obviously working on the behalf of the kidnapper. But what a funny idea to kidnap a performer on stage, send for the doctor, and thereafter, please, asked Mifroid repeatedly, curiously, decidedly curious. Then he turned to the little room and, addressing the people whom Raoul and the Persian were able to see from where they lay, what do you say to all this, gentlemen? You are the only ones who have not given your views, and yet you must have an opinion of some sort. Thereupon Raoul and the Persian saw the startled faces of the joint managers appearing on the landing, and they heard Moncharmin's excited voice. There are things happening here, Monsieur Commissary, which we are unable to explain. And for Two Faces, disappointed. Thank you for the information, gentlemen, said Mifroid with a jeer. But the stage manager, holding his chin in the hollow of his right hand, which is the attitude of profound thought, said, It is not the first time that Mauclair has fallen asleep in the theater. I remember finding him, one evening, snoring in a little recess with this snuffing box beside him. Is that long ago? Asked Monsieur Mifroid, carefully wiping his eyeglasses. Not so very long ago. Wait a bit. It was the night, of course, yes, it was the night when Carlotta, you know, Mr. Commissary, gave her famous croak. Really? The night when Carlotta gave her famous croak? And Monsieur Mifroid, replacing his gleaming glasses on his nose, fixed the stage manager with a contemplative stare. So, Mauclair takes snuff, does he? He asked carelessly. Yes, Monsieur Commissary. Look, there is his snuff box on that little shelf. Oh, he's a great snuff taker. So am I, said Mifroid, and put the snuff box in his pocket. Raoul and the Persian, themselves unobserved, watched the removal of the three bodies by a number of scene shifters, who were followed by the commissary and all the people with him. Their steps were heard for a few minutes on the stage above. When they were alone, the Persian made a sign to Raoul to stand up. Raoul did so, but as he did not lift his hand in front of his eyes, ready to fire, the Persian told him to resume the attitude and continue it, whatever happened. But it tires the hand unnecessarily, whispered Raoul. If I do fire, I shan't be sure of my aim. Then shift your pistol to the other hand, said the Persian. I can't shoot with my left hand. Thereupon the Persian made this queer reply, which was certainly not calculated to throw light into the young man's flurried brain. It's not a question of shooting with the right or the left hand. It's a question of holding one of your hands as though you were going to pull the trigger of the pistol with your arm bent. As for the pistol itself, when all is said, you can put that in your pocket. And he added, let this be clearly understood, or I will answer for nothing. It is a matter of life and death. And now, silence, and follow me. The cellars of the opera are enormous, and they are 5 in number. Raoul followed the Persian, and wondered if he would have done without him, his companion, in this extraordinary labyrinth. What could he have possibly done without him? They went down to the 3rd cellar, and their progress was still lit by some distant lamp. The lower they went, the more precious the Persians seemed to take, and the more precautions. He kept on turning to Raoul to see if he was holding his arm properly, showing him how he himself carried his hand, as if always ready to fire, though the pistol was in his pocket. Suddenly, a loud voice made them stop. Someone above them shouted, "All the door shutters on the stage! The commissary of the police wants them." Steps were heard, and the shadows glided through the staircase. The Persian drew back Raoul behind the set-piece. They saw passing before them old bent men by age and the past burden of the opera scenery. Some could hardly drag themselves along. Others, from habit, with stooping bodies and outstretched hands, looked for doors to shut. They were the door shutters, the old, worn-out scene shifters, on whom a charitable management had taken pity, giving them a job of shutting doors above and below the stage. They went about it incessantly, from top to bottom of the building, shutting the doors, and they were called the draft expellers, at least at that time. For I have little doubt that by now they are all dead. Drafts are very bad for the voice, wherever they come from. The two men might have stumbled over them, waking them up and provoking a request for explanations. For the moment, Monsieur Mifroid's inquiry saved them from any such unpleasant encounters. The Persian and Raoul welcomed this incident, which relieved them of the inconvenient witness. For some of those doors shutters, having nothing else to do or nowhere to lay their heads, stayed in the opera from the wilderness of necessity and spent the night there. But they were not left to enjoy the solitude for long. Other shades now came down by the same way by which the door shutters had gone. Each of these shades carried a little lantern and moved in and out, in and above and below and all around, as though looking for something or somebody. "Hang it," muttered the Persian. "I don't know what they are looking for, but they might easily find us. Let us get away quick." "Your hand up, sir? Ready to fire? Bend your arm. More, that's it. Hand at the lever. Eye level, as though you were fighting a duel and waiting for the word fire. Oh, leave your pistol in your pocket. Quick, come along and downstairs. Level your eye. Question of life or death. Here, this way. These stairs." They reached the 5th cellar. Oh, what a cruel, sir. What a duel. Once in the 5th cellar, the Persian drew his breath. He seemed to enjoy a rather greater sense of security than he had displayed when they had stopped in the 3rd, but he never altered the attitude of his hand, and Raoul, remembering the Persian's observation, "I know these pistols can be relied upon," was more and more astonished, wondering why anyone should be so gratified at being able to rely upon a pistol which he did not intend to use. But the Persian left him no time for reflection, telling Raoul that he had to stay where he was. He ran up a few steps of the staircase which he had left, and then returned. "How stupid of us," he whispered. "We shall soon have seen the end of those men with their lanterns. Is the fireman going their rounds?" The two men waited 5 minutes longer. Then the Persian took Raoul up the stairs, but suddenly he stopped him there with a gesture. Something moved in the darkness before them. "Flat on your stomach," whispered the Persian. The two men lay flat on the floor. They were only just in time. A shade, this time carrying no light, just a shade in the shade, passed. It passed close to them, near enough to touch them. They felt the warmth of its cloak upon them, for they could not distinguish shade sufficiently to see that it wore a black cloak which shrouded it from head to foot. On its head it had a soft felt hat. It moved away, drawing its feet against the walls and sometimes giving a kick into a corner. "Whew," said the Persian. "We've had a narrow escape. That shade knows me and has twice taken me to the manager's office. It is someone belonging to the theater police? Asked Raoul. It's someone much worse than that, replied the Persian, without giving any further explanation. It's not he. If he does not come behind us, we shall always see his yellow eyes. This is more or less a safeguard tonight, but he may come, even from behind, stealing up, and we are dead men if we do not choose to keep our hands as though about to fire at the level of our eyes in front. The Persian had hardly finished speaking when a fantastic face came into sight, a whole fiery face, not dealing with two yellow eyes. Yes, a head of fire came toward them, a man's height, but with no body attached to it. The face shed fire, locked in the darkness, like a flame shaped in a man's head. Oh, said the Persian between his teeth, I have never seen this before. Pamchin was not mad after all. He had seen it. What can that flame be? It asked. Not he. But he may have seen it. Take care. Take care. You hand me the level of your eyes, in heaven's name. At the level of your eyes, you know most of the tricks, but not this one. Come, let us run. It is safer. Hand at level of your eyes. And they fled down the passageway that opened before them. After a few seconds, that seemed to them long minutes. So they stopped. He doesn't often come this way, said the Persian. This side has nothing to do with him. This side does not lead to the lake, nor to the house on the lake. But perhaps he knows that we are here at his heels, although I promised him to leave him alone and never to meddle in his own business again. So saying, he turned his head, and Raoul also turned his head, and they again saw the head of fire behind their two heads. It followed them, and it must have run also, and perhaps faster than they, for it seemed to be getting nearer to them. At the same time, they began to perceive a certain noise of which they could not guess the nature. They simply noticed that the sound seemed to move and approach with the fiery face. It was a noise as though thousands of nails had been scraped against a blackboard, and perfectly unendurable noise, that is sometimes made by a little stone inside the chalk that grates on the blackboard. They counted to retreat, or rather, I should say they continued to retreat, but the fiery face came on, gaining upon them. They could see its features clearly now. The eyes were round and staring, the nose a little crooked, and the mouth large, with a hanging lower lip, very like the eyes, nose and lip of the moon, when the moon is quite red, bright red. How did that red moon manage to glide through the darkness? At a man's height, with nothing to support it, at least apparently. And how did it go so fast, straight ahead with such staring eyes? And what was that scratching and scraping and grating sound which it brought with it? The Persian and Raoul could retreat no further and flatten themselves against the wall, not knowing what was going to happen because of the incomprehensible head of fire, and especially now because the more extensive, swarming, living, numerous sound, for the sound was certainly made up of hundreds of little sounds that moved in the darkness under the fiery face. And the fierce face came on with its nose, came level with them, and the two companions, flat against their walls, felt that their hair stand on end with horror, for they now knew what the thousand noises meant. They came in a troop, hustled along in the shadow by innumerable little hurried waves, swifter than the waves that rushed over the sands at high tide. Little night waves, foaming under the sun, under the moon, under the fiery head that was like a moon, and the little waves passed between their legs, climbing up their legs, immersing irresistibly. Raoul and the Persian could no longer restrain their cries of horror, dismay, and pain, nor could they continue to hold their hands at the level of their eyes. Their hands went down to their legs and pushed back the waves, which were full of little legs and nails and claws and teeth. Yes, Raoul and the Persian were ready to faint, like Pampin, the fireman. But the head of the fire turned round in answer to their cries and spoke to them. "Don't move. Don't move. Whatever you do, don't come after me. I am the rat catcher. Let me pass with my rats." And the head of the fire department disappeared, vanished in the darkness, while the passage in the front of it was lit up as a result of change which the rat catcher had made in his dark lantern. Before, so as not to scare the rats in front of him, he had turned his dark lantern on himself, lighting it for his own head. Now, to hasten their flight, he lit the dark space in front of them, and he jumped along, dragging with him the waves of the crashing sea. With all thousand voices, Raoul and the Persian breathed again, though still trembling. I ought to have remembered that Eric talked to me about the rat catcher and said the Persian, but he never told me what he looked like. And it's funny that I should never have met him before. Of course, Eric never comes to this part. "Are we very far from the lake, sir?" asked Raoul. "And as you know him, we shall talk to him." "Baby," said the Persian, "we shall never enter the house on the lake, by the lake. I myself have never landed on the other bank, the bank on which the house stands. You have to cross the lake first, and it is well guarded. I fear that more than one of those men, old scene shifters, old door shutters, who have never been seen again, were simply tempted to cross the lake. It is terrible. I find myself would have been nearly killed there, if the monster had not recognized me in time. One piece of advice, sir: never go near the lake, and above all, shut your ears if you hear the voice singing under the water, the siren's voice." "But then, what are we here for?" asked Raoul, in a transport of fever and impatience and rage. "If you can do nothing for Christine, at least let me die for her." The Persian tried to calm the young man. "We have only one means of saving Christine Daae, believe me, which is to enter the house unperceived by the monster. And is there any hope of that, sir? Ah, if I had not that hope, I would not have come to fetch you. And how can one enter the house on the lake without crossing the lake? From the third cellar, from which we were so unluckily driven away. We will go back there now. I will tell you," said the Persian, with a sudden change in his voice. "I will tell you the exact place, sir. It is between a set piece and a discarded scene from the Roi de Lahore, exactly at the spot where Joseph Buquet died. Come, sir, take courage and follow me, and hold your hand at the level of your eye. But where are we?" The Persian lit his lamp again and flung its rays down two enormous corridors that crossed each other at right angles. "We must be," he said, "in the part used more particularly for the waterworks. I see no fire coming from the furnaces." He went in front of Raoul, seeking his road, stopping abruptly, and then he was afraid of meeting some watermen. Then they had to protect themselves against the glow of a sort of underground forge which the men were extinguishing, and at which Raoul recognized the demons whom Christine had seen at the time of her first captivity. In this way, they gradually arrived beneath the huge cellars below the stage. They must at this time have been at the very bottom of the tub, and at an extremely great depth, when we remember that the earth was dug out of 50 feet below the water that lay under the whole of that part of Paris. The Persian touched a partition in the wall and said, "If I am not mistaken, this is a wall that might easily belong to the house on the lake." He was striking a partition of the wall of the tub, and perhaps it would be as well for the reader to know how the bottom of the partition walls of the tub were built, in order to prevent the water surrounding the building operations from the remaining in immediate contact with the walls supporting the whole of the theatrical machinery. The architect was obliged to build a double case in every direction. The work of constructing this double case took a whole year. It was the wall of the first inner case that the Persian struck when speaking to Raoul of the house on the lake. To anyone understanding the architecture of the edifice, the Persian's actions would have seemed to indicate that Eric's mysterious house had been built in the double case, formed of a thick wall constructed as an embankment or a dam, then of brick wall, a tremendous layer of cement, and another wall several yards thick. At the Persian's words, Raoul flung himself against the wall and listened eagerly, but he heard nothing, except distant steps sounding on the floor of the upper portions of the theater. The Persian darkened his lantern again. "Look out," he said. "Keep your hand high, and silence, for we shall try another way of getting in." And he led him to the little staircase by which they had come down lately. They went up, stopping at each step, peering into the darkness and the silence. Still, they came to the third cellar. Here the Persian mentioned and motioned to Raoul to go on his knees, and in this way, crawling on both knees and one hand, for the other hand held in the position indicated, they reached the end wall. Against this wall stood a large discarded scene from the Roi de Lahore. Close to the scene was a set piece. Between the scene and the set piece there was just room for a body which one day was found hanging there, the body of Joseph Buquet. The Persian, still kneeling, stopped and listened. For a moment he seemed to hesitate, and looked at Raoul. Then he turned his eyes upward, toward the second cellar, which sent down the faint glimmer of a lantern through a cranny between two boards. This glimmer seemed to trouble the Persian. At last he tossed his head and made up his mind to act. He slipped between the set piece and the scene from the Roi de Lahore, with Raoul close upon his heels. With his free hand the Persian felt the wall. Raoul saw him bear heavily upon the wall, just as he had pressed against the wall in Christine's dressing room. Then a stone gave way, leaving a hole in the wall. This time the Persian took his pistol from his pocket and made a sign to Raoul to do as he did. He cocked the pistol, and resolutely, still on his knees, he wiggled through the hole in the wall. Raoul, who had wished to pass first, had become content to follow him. The hole was very narrow. The Persian stopped almost at once. Raoul heard him feeling the stones around him. Then the Persian took out his dark lantern again, stooped forward, examined something beneath him, and immediately extinguished his lantern. Raoul heard him say in a whisper, "We shall have to stop and drop a few yards without making a noise. Take off your boots." The Persian handed his own shoes to Raoul. "Put them outside the wall," he said. "We shall find them when we leave." He crawled a little farther on his knees, then turned right around and said, "I am going to hang by my hands from the edge of the stone and let myself drop into this house. You must do exactly the same. Do not be afraid. I will catch you in my arms." Raoul soon heard a dull sound, evidently produced by the fall of the Persian, and then dropped down. He felt himself clasped in the Persian's arms. "Hush!" said the Persian, and they stood motionless, listening. The darkness was thick around them, the silence heavy and terrible. Then the Persian began to make play with the dark lantern again, turning the rays over their heads, looking for the hole through which they had come, and failing to find it. "Oh," he said. "The stone has closed itself." And the light of the lantern swept down the wall and over the floor. The Persian stooped and picked up something, a sort of cord, which he examined for a second and flung away with horror. "The Punjab lasso," he muttered. "What is it?" asked Raoul. The Persian shivered. It might very well be the rope by which the man was hanged, and which was looked for so long. And suddenly, seized with fresh anxiety, he moved the little red disc of his lantern over the walls. In this way, he lit up a curious thing, the trunk of a tree, which seemed to still be quite alive, with its leaves and its branches, and that tree ran right up the walls and disappeared in the ceiling. Because of the smallness of the luminous disc, it was difficult at first to make out the appearance of things. They saw a corner of a branch, and a leaf, and another leaf, and next to it nothing at all. Nothing but a ray of light that seemed to reflect itself. Raoul passed his hand over nothing, over that reflection. "Hello?" he said. "The wall is a looking-glass." "Yes, a looking-glass," said the Persian, in a tone of deep emotion, and passing the hand that held the pistol over his moist forehead, he said, "We have dropped into the torture chamber." What the Persian knew of this torture chamber, and of what there befell him and his companion, shall be told in his own words, as set down in a manuscript which left behind him, and which I shall copy verbatim. Monsieur Pedro Galliard has himself told me that he created a few additional posts as door shutters for old stage carpenters, whom he was unwilling to dismiss from the service of the opera. In those days, it was still part of the fireman's duty to watch over the safety of the opera house outside the performances, but this service has since been suppressed. I asked Monsieur Pedro Galliard the reason, and he replied, it was because the management was afraid that, in their inexperience, the cellars of the opera, the firemen might set fire to the building. Like the Persian, I can give no further explanation touching the apparition of this shade, whereas in this historic narrative, everything else will be normally explained. However abnormal the course of events may seem, I cannot give the reader expressly to understand what the Persian meant by the words. It is someone much worse than that. The reader must try to guess for himself, for I promised Monsieur Pedro Galliard, the former manager of the opera, to keep his secret regarding the extremely interesting and useful personality of the wandering cloaked shade, which, while condemning itself to live in the cellars of the opera, rendered such immense services to those who, on gala evenings, for instance, ventured to stray away from the stage. I am speaking of state services, and upon my word of honor, I can say no more. All the water had to be exhausted in the building of the opera to give an idea of the amount of water that was pumped up. I can tell the reader that it is represented in the area of the courtyard of the Louvre, and the height half as deep, again, as the towers of Notre Dame, and nevertheless, the engineers had to leave a lake. These 2 pairs of boots, which were placed according to the Parisian papers, just between the set piece and the scene from the Rue de Lahore, on the spot where Joseph Buquet was found hanging, were never discovered. They must have been taken by some stage carpenter or door shutter. And that is all for tonight, my friends. So mysterious. Reading this gives me the chills a little bit. All this creeping about in the dark, between walls, secret passageways, an underground lake that was left by engineers after they had pumped so much water out they still had water left for a lake they could not pump out. I think we shall get much further and closer to the end in chapter 21, which we will read tomorrow night. This has been Indiana Homes for Storytime. Love to you all, and good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.